Ever feel like your brain's about to, like, explode,
Yeah.
from information overload?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, seriously, we're bombarded with the equivalent of 34 gigabytes every single day.
It's a lot.
That's like downloading a whole movie every hour.
Wow, yeah.
So today we're diving into Tiago Forte's Building a Second Brain to see if it can help us manage the madness
Right.
and maybe even unlock some creative superpowers along the way.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just about the quantity of information. It's about making it work for you.
Huh.
Think of this deep dive as a journey to build a system that actually boosts your creativity.
Okay, I'm ready to build.
Great.
Forte talks about this code system. Capture, organize, distill, express.
Yes.
What I'm curious about is,
Mm-hmm.
where do we even begin? I mean, I'm already feeling overwhelmed just thinking about organizing everything I encounter.
Well, that's where the capture stage comes in.
Yeah.
And the key here is to be incredibly selective.
Well-
Forte calls the things we should be capturing knowledge assets.
Hmm.
But what makes something a knowledge asset versus just like random information?
Okay, knowledge assets.
Yeah.
This feels kind of like Marie Kondoing my brain, right?
Yeah.
Only keeping the information that sparks joy or, in this case, has real potential for future use.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think solutions to problems you've faced, time-saving tips, things that inspire you,
Yeah.
or even ideas that shift your perspective. It's
Right.
about curating a collection of valuable resources, like building a museum exhibit of your most important ideas.
That's a great analogy. Now, I'm already a Notes app fanatic.
Okay.
So this whole digital second brain idea really speaks to me.
Sure.
But the book mentions this Amelia character
Yeah.
who seems to be drowning in her own notes.
Right.
What went wrong there?
Amelia made a classic mistake.
Okay.
She was capturing everything without any real strategy. It's like hoarding every object you come across,
Right.
with the vague idea that it might be useful someday.
Yeah.
It just creates more clutter and anxiety.
Okay, so being selective is key. It is. But how do we decide what's actually worth capturing? I mean, some things might seem interesting in the moment,
Right.
but fade in importance later.
This is where I find Richard Feynman's technique so fascinating.
Okay.
He had a set of core questions.
Mhm.
He always asked himself when encountering new information.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just random trivia. He was
Okay.
asking, how does this connect to the big questions I'm trying to answer in my work?
Wait, so it's not just about capturing information.
No.
It's about actively connecting it to your own goals and interests.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like having a filter to sift out the noise
Yeah.
and only keep the gold nuggets.
Exactly. It transforms note-taking from passive consumption
Right.
to active engagement with the information.
Mhm.
You're not just collecting facts.
Right.
You're building a toolbox for your future self.
I love that.
Great.
Okay, so we've captured a bunch of knowledge assets.
Right.
Now how do we make sense of it all?
Okay.
I'm envisioning a giant digital pile of notes right now, and I'm not sure where to even start organizing.
That's where the organize stage comes in.
Okay.
And here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
Because we're not organizing by subject, as you might expect.
Mhm.
Think about it.
Okay.
If your kitchen were organized by food type, it would be a nightmare to actually cook anything.
Okay, a kitchen analogy intrigued me. I'm a much better note taker than I am a cook,
Okay.
but I think I see where you're going with this.
Instead of subject-based categories,
Hmm.
we're going to organize by actionability,
Yeah.
by how relevant something is to our current goals and activities.
Right.
This is where the PIRA method comes in.
Okay.
Projects, areas, resources, and archives.
All right, let's break that down.
Okay.
What exactly are projects in this context?
Yeah.
My brain is already starting to feel more organized.
Good. Welcome back to our deep dive into building a second brain. Before we jumped into the organize phase, we talked about capturing those valuable knowledge assets and using Richard Feynman's technique to connect them to our goals. Do you have any specific examples of knowledge assets you've captured recently that really resonated with you?
Actually, yeah. Just this morning, I was reading an article about how urban planners are incorporating green spaces into cities to combat climate change.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't just the facts, it was the innovative solutions they presented that felt like aha moments for me.
Right.
Those solutions are definitely knowledge assets I want to explore further.
That's a perfect example. Seeing those creative solutions likely sparked ideas and possibilities in your own mind.
Yeah.
That's the power of a knowledge asset. It's not just information, it's fuel for your thinking.
Okay, back to the organize phase and this PRA method, projects, areas, resources, and archives.
Yes.
We're about to dive into what projects actually are in this context.
Think of projects as having clear objectives and deadlines. It could be something work-related, like launching a new website,
Uh-huh.
or something personal, like planning a trip.
Right.
Each project gets its own dedicated space in your digital second brain.
So if I'm finally tackling that novel I've been dreaming of writing,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a project, right?
Right.
And within that project folder, I'd store character sketches,
Right.
plot outlines, research notes,
Yeah.
basically anything related to that specific writing project.
Exactly. It's about creating a centralized hub
Okay.
for all the information related to that particular project.
Yeah.
No more scrambling through scattered notes
Yeah.
or trying to remember which document contained that brilliant idea you had weeks ago.
I can already feel my stress levels decreasing.
Yeah.
All right, so projects are for those short-term endeavors with deadlines.
Right?
What about those ongoing aspects of our lives? You mentioned areas earlier.
Areas are those spheres of responsibility or interest that
Yeah.
don't have a specific end date,
Uh-huh.
but require continuous attention. Think personal finances, health, relationships,
Yeah.
those ongoing themes that we're always working on.
Okay, so for areas like my fitness goals,
Right.
I might have articles on nutrition, workout routines,
Uh-huh.
maybe even motivational quotes to keep me going.
Right.
But what about something like learning a new language
Okay.
that feels less defined
Yeah.
or fall under resources or areas?
That's a great question. And it highlights that there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
The key is to choose the category that feels most intuitive and useful for you.
Okay.
In the case of learning a language,
Uh-huh.
it could fit in either resources or areas,
Okay.
depending on your current level of engagement and goals.
So if I'm casually exploring different languages,
Yeah.
it might stay in resources.
Right.
But if I've committed to actively learning Spanish, for example,
Mm-hmm.
it would graduate to an area with its own dedicated space.
Precisely. It's all about creating a system that reflects your priorities and evolving interests. Now, let's talk about those someday interests and passions.
Okay.
The things that light us up but haven't yet become active projects or areas.
Mm-hmm.
This is where resources comes in.
This is my favorite category already.
Really?
I have so many someday interests, from learning astronomy to starting a sourdough bread baking hobby.
Oh, wow.
It feels good to give those interests a dedicated home in my second brain.
It's like planting seeds for future exploration.
Yeah.
As you stumble upon articles, videos, or other resources related to those interests, you can curate them in your resources section.
Right.
And who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe one day those resources will spark a new project or area of focus in your life.
It's almost like giving those someday dreams a chance to germinate. Okay, so we've got projects, areas, and resources all beautifully organized and ready to inspire action.
Great.
What about the stuff that's no longer actively relevant?
Okay.
Does it just fade into the digital abyss?
Not at all.
Okay.
That's where archives comes in your cold storage for completed projects. Areas that are no longer relevant
Sure,
or
it's-
interests you've moved on from,
Right.
you don't want to delete them entirely,
Right.
but you also don't want them cluttering your active workspace.
So it's like that box of old photos and letters you keep tucked away in the attic.
Exactly.
You don't look at it every day, but you're glad it's there when you need it.
You might not need to access those archived notes on a daily basis anymore,
Right.
but it's still valuable to have them stored somewhere in case you ever need to refer back to them.
This is all making so much sense now. I'm already starting to visualize my digital second brain with all its neatly organized projects, areas, resources, and archives. But I have a confession.
Okay.
I tend to be a bit of a note-taking hoarder.
Uh-huh.
Even with this system, I'm worried about getting bogged down in details.
I understand that feeling. That's why the distill stage is so crucial.
Okay.
It's not just about organizing information.
Okay.
It's about transforming it into something truly accessible and useful to your future self. Remember those nonsensical notes we talked about
Well,
earlier?
there's the alien cucumbers note, still a mystery.
Right.
But I think I'm starting to see how the distill phase can help prevent that.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that the information I save actually makes sense when I look back at it later.
Exactly. It's about turning raw data into concentrated knowledge.
Okay.
And Forte suggests a layered approach to distillation.
Mhm.
It's not just about summarizing everything,
Right.
but about extracting the most valuable and relevant parts for your specific needs.
Okay, walk me through those layers again.
Okay.
I'm ready to turn my second brain into a lean, mean knowledge machine.
Let's say you've found an article about the history of coffee.
Okay.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
The first layer is simply capturing that article in your second brain,
Okay.
filed under the appropriate PRRA category.
Right.
Then comes the highlighting.
Yeah.
As you read, mark the key passages that stand out or that you want to remember.
So it's like creating a personalized roadmap of the most important parts of the article.
Yes.
What's next?
The third layer is bolding.
Okay.
Go back to those highlighted sections and bold specific keywords or phrases
Right.
that capture the essence of the idea.
Hmm.
It's like creating a mini index within the highlighted sections, making it even easier to scan for specific information.
So we're essentially zooming in on the most crucial elements. I like it.
Precisely. And finally, the fourth layer is summarizing.
Okay.
In your own words,
Uh-huh.
write a concise summary, just a few sentences, that captures the main takeaways or the aspects that resonated most with you.
Right.
That summary becomes your go-to reference point
Okay.
when you revisit the article in the future.
This is brilliant. It reminds me of how documentary filmmaker Ken Burns talked about ruthlessly distilling hours of footage down to the most impactful moments.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It highlights that Distill isn't about summarizing everything.
Right.
It's about extracting the essence,
Mm.
the most valuable insights that will serve your purposes.
And that ties back to the idea of knowledge assets, right?
Yes.
We're not just passively saving information.
Right.
We're actively transforming it into something we can use to learn, create, and solve problems.
You got it. It's about moving beyond consumption and becoming a producer of knowledge.
Right.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most exciting stage of the Code System Express. This is where we put all that carefully curated knowledge to work.
This is the part I'm most excited about,
Right.
but also a little intimidated by.
Uh-huh.
I have all these ideas swirling around,
Right.
but sometimes I get stuck in that blank page paralysis.
Sure.
How do we overcome that inertia and actually use all this knowledge we've gathered?
That's where Forte's concept of intermediate packets comes in.
Okay.
Remember those?
Yes.
We touched on them earlier when we talked about projects.
Yes, those bite-sized chunks of a larger project.
Okay.
I have a feeling this is going to be key to unlocking that creative potential.
You're absolutely right. Intermediate packets are a game changer when it comes to moving from idea to action.
Okay.
It's about breaking down a large, potentially overwhelming project
Right.
into smaller, more manageable units of work.
Okay, remind me how this intermediate packet idea works in practice.
Okay.
Give me some concrete examples.
Imagine you're writing a book.
Okay.
Instead of staring at a blank page
Uh-huh.
and feeling intimidated by the sheer scope of the project,
Right.
you break it down into smaller packets, like chapters or even sections within chapters.
Right.
Each of those packets becomes a manageable unit of work,
Mhm.
making the overall project feel much less daunting.
So it's about taking those big, hairy goals
Yeah,
and breaking them down into smaller, more achievable steps.
exactly. And the beauty of this approach is that
Yeah.
it not only makes a project feel less overwhelming,
Right.
but it also creates opportunities for early feedback and course correction. You can get feedback on individual chapters, for example, and make adjustments as needed before moving on to the next section.
That makes so much sense.
All
It's
right.
like building a house brick by brick.
Yes.
Instead of trying to construct the entire thing at once.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And it's not just about writing books.
Right.
This approach can be applied to all sorts of creative endeavors.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're designing a website.
Okay.
You could break the project down into intermediate packets, like designing the homepage,
Right.
creating the navigation menu,
Okay.
developing individual pages, and so on.
Or if you're planning a big event,
Uh-huh.
you could have intermediate packets for securing the venue,
Yes.
creating the guest list,
Yeah.
designing the invitations, planning the menu, and so forth.
Exactly. The key is to identify the natural breaks or stages
Okay.
within a project
Uh-huh.
and turn those into manageable chunks of work.
This is so practical. I can already feel the mental overwhelm starting to dissipate. It's like those intermediate packets are giving us permission to take things one step at a time.
That's the power of this approach.
Yeah.
It removes the pressure of having to do everything at once
Right.
and allows us to focus on making progress one packet at a time.
And here's what I love about this. You mentioned earlier
Uh-huh.
that these intermediate packets can often be repurposed for different projects.
Yes.
It's like we're building a library of reusable building blocks
Yeah.
for all sorts of creative
I
endeavors.
love that analogy. It's about leveraging the work you've already done
Right.
and finding creative ways to apply it in new contexts.
So, for example, if I've created a really solid outline for a blog post, I could potentially adapt that same outline for a presentation or a workshop on the same topic.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the underlying structure
Mm.
and seeing how it can be applied in different ways.
Okay.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
I'm all about working smarter. And speaking of working smarter, Forte shares a Latin phrase that really resonated with me. Verum ipsum factum.
Okay.
It means the truth is made.
Oh, wow.
It's this idea that we truly understand something only when we've actually done it, when
Yeah.
we've created something with it.
I love that phrase. It highlights the importance of action and creation
Yeah.
in solidifying knowledge and understanding.
Hmm.
It's not enough to simply read about something or hear about it.
Yeah.
You have to engage with it on a deeper level to truly make it your own.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah, it has been a lot.
We've explored the code system: capture, organize, distill, express.
Yes.
We've talked about identifying and capturing those valuable knowledge assets, organizing them using the PRA method,
Right.
distilling information to make it more accessible,
Yes.
and finally using the power of intermediate packets to put our knowledge into action.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
And I think the key takeaway here is that we have more control over information overload than we often realize. Yeah.
We can be intentional about what we consume, how we organize it,
Right.
and how we use it to create something meaningful.
I totally agree. We're not just passive recipients of information.
Right.
We can be active curators and creators of knowledge.
And that's a really empowering realization. It means that we have the power to shape our own learning, growth, and creative expression.
Before we wrap up this episode,
Okay.
I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
Okay.
Think about 2 knowledge assets from the past 24 hours that are worth capturing in your second brain. It could be anything.
Sure.
An insightful article,
Uh-huh.
a helpful tip,
Yeah.
a quote that resonated with you, an idea you want to explore further.
I love that challenge.
Yeah.
It's a great way to start putting these concepts into practice right away.
And remember, it's not about capturing everything.
Right.
Be selective.
Yeah.
Choose the things that spark your interest and that you can see yourself using in the future.
Right.
And don't worry about being perfect.
Yeah. Just start capturing, and the rest will fall into place.
That's great advice. It's all about taking that first step and experimenting to see what works for you.
Exactly. We're not striving for perfection. We're
No.
aiming for progress.
Yes.
All right? We've covered a lot of ground,
Yeah.
but there's still more to explore.
Okay.
When we come back,
Uh-huh.
we'll dive into the practical side of things,
Okay.
the digital tools and strategies that can help you build a second brain that truly works for you.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into building a second brain.
Right.
So far, we've tackled the code system,
Yes.
capture, organize, distill, express,
Uh-huh.
and I'm already feeling a sense of calm amidst the usual information chaos.
That's good.
But now I'm curious about the practical side of things.
Okay.
What kind of digital tools can help us actually build this second brain?
Sure.
I'm imagining a super sophisticated AI-powered system,
Uh-huh.
but maybe that's just my sci-fi brain taking over.
Well, AI might play a role in the future. The truth is, you don't need anything fancy to get started.
Right.
Any note-taking app that lets you create folders and tags will work.
Okay.
The key is finding a tool that feels intuitive and fits your personal style.
So no need to get lost in the rabbit hole of productivity apps.
Right.
I have to admit, I've definitely fallen into that trap before.
Yeah.
Spending more time researching tools than actually using them.
It's so easy to do. But remember, the tool itself is just a vehicle. The real magic happens in the process of capturing, organizing, distilling, and expressing your ideas.
Right.
The best tool is the one you'll actually use consistently.
That's a great point. It's like saying a fancy chef knife won't automatically make you a better cook.
Right.
It's the skill and creativity you bring to the kitchen that truly matters.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our digital toolbox ready.
Uh-huh.
What are some strategies for actually using these tools effectively?
Okay.
I'm imagining my second brain as this interconnected web of notes, but I'm not sure how to make those connections meaningful.
This is where the real fun begins. As you start capturing and organizing your knowledge assets,
Mm-hmm.
think about how they connect to each other.
Okay.
Use tags to create relationships between notes from different projects or areas.
Right.
For example, if you have a note about a specific marketing strategy
Right.
and another note about a psychology study on consumer behavior,
Uh-huh.
you could tag them both with marketing psychology.
So those tags become like threads connecting different ideas.
Exactly.
I can see how that would help me see patterns in relationships I might have missed otherwise.
Right.
It's like those crime scene boards with the photos and red string connecting everything.
Yeah.
Only in this case, we're mapping our ideas.
And as you start building this web of interconnected notes,
Okay.
don't be afraid to experiment. Move things around. Try different organizational schemes.
Right.
And see what works best for you.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of a digital second brain is that it's flexible and adaptable. That's so liberating.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off having to create the perfect system from the start.
Right.
It's more about playing, exploring, and discovering what resonates with your thinking style.
I couldn't have said it better.
Right.
The goal isn't to create a rigid structure,
Right.
but a dynamic system that evolves along with your interests and goals.
This whole conversation has really shifted my perspective on information overload.
Okay.
It's not about trying to remember everything.
Right.
It's about curating a collection of knowledge assets that can support us in our work, our creative endeavors, and even our personal growth.
Absolutely. And as we cultivate this external second brain,
Right.
it starts to influence our internal thinking processes. We become more intentional about what we consume,
Yeah.
more discerning in our analysis,
Yeah.
and more strategic in our actions.
It's like we're upgrading our mental operating system.
Right.
Okay, before we wrap up,
Sure.
I want to loop back to those intermediate packets we talked about earlier.
They seem so crucial for turning knowledge into action.
Yes.
But I'm curious about how we can apply them in our everyday lives.
Think about a project you've been putting off.
Huh?
Maybe writing a blog post,
Uh-huh.
learning a new skill,
Right.
or even just cleaning out your closet.
Right.
Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the entire task,
Yeah.
break it down into those smaller, more manageable packets.
So if I wanted to finally tackle that mountain of clothes in my closet,
Okay.
I could create intermediate packets for sorting, donating, organizing, and maybe even a fashion show packet for trying things on and rediscovering forgotten treasures.
That's a perfect example. Suddenly, the task feels less like a chore and more like a series of mini adventures.
Right.
And as you complete each packet, you build momentum and confidence, making it easier to keep going.
It's like those video games where you level up by completing smaller quests.
Yeah.
Each intermediate packet becomes a win, a step closer to achieving the larger goal.
Exactly. It's about gamifying the process,
Okay.
making it fun and rewarding.
Right.
And who knows, maybe you'll discover a hidden talent for fashion styling along the way.
Now that would be a bonus level.
Right.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It has.
And I think we've given our listeners a powerful framework
Yeah.
for not only managing information overload, but also unleashing their creative potential.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
Likewise.
I hope everyone feels empowered to start building their own second brain.
Yes.
And to see the transformative impact it can have on their lives.
And remember, it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about taking action, experimenting, and enjoying the process of becoming a more intentional and empowered learner, thinker, and creator.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into building a second brain.
It's been great talking with you.